The Enlightenment is known for its significant intellectual and philosophical influence on Europe. Things like scientific discovery and the separation of church and state were products of this cultural awakening. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the Enlightenment also had a major impact on the arts during this time. Painters of the era, such as Joseph Wright, Francisco Goya, and Thomas Gainsborough, reflect the themes of the Enlightenment through their works. Artists are very much products of their time, and typically this change in art is gradual. It changes slightly for each new generation, but the cultural shift at the time was so drastic that looking at art from before and during the Enlightenment is like night and day. As a first example, let's look at Mr. and Mrs. Andrews by Thomas Gainsborough. The most immediately noticeable aspect of this painting is the extensive natural backdrop. The couple may be the focal point, but they hardly make up half of the portrait. We can see that nature was considered just as important as the people. Everything is highly detailed, regardless of how substantial it may be. Every blade of grass or tree leaf is accounted for, which reflects the general idea at the time that we appreciate and understand the natural world. Additionally, the Andrews are positioned in a relaxed and informal manner, which reflects the growing influence of the middle class during this time, where wealthy landowners would commission paintings such as this as a symbol of status and individual identity. As for the more intellectual side of the Enlightenment, we have Joseph Wright's An Experiment on a Bird in the Air Pump. Scientific discovery was, of course, a very strong aspect of this era. We can very clearly see several people crowded around the table to view an experiment. The search for knowledge in the natural world was intriguing, but wasn't limited to scholars. Anyone with an interest was able to engage in this sort of activity, further cementing the idea that one has the freedom to do as they please. Unlike Gainsborough's painting, we have a clear point of interest. The lighting places clear emphasis on the air pump in the middle. This is, of course, to highlight the scientific curiosity of the time, but the depiction of this specific experiment raises some ethical concerns. The image of the bird suffocating was purposefully used to prompt the viewers to remain cognizant of the more ethically questionable aspects of scientific discovery. We may want to know more about the natural world, but we should remain respectful to it in our study. And finally, the 3rd of May, 1808, by Francisco Goya. Being painted during the Romantic era, the Enlightenment themes may not be immediately noticeable, but it actually is very strongly representing the struggle for human rights and individual liberty. The painting commemorates the execution of Spanish civilians during the Peninsular War, and while anonymous, the civilians are still painted in very high detail. This subtly embraces the Enlightenment belief in the inherent value of every individual. Highlighting injustice and excess use of force, Goya challenges authority and reminds us of the importance of holding those in power accountable. He wants to invoke an emotional response on the viewer, to compel us to confront the cost of violence. This emphasis on empathy and compassion reflects the idea of human community showcased in the Enlightenment, all going to show that Enlightenment ideals were, and still are, important after the era.